These are my teammates. They'll introduce themselves.
I'm Matt Gee.
Hi, I'm Mike Roth.
Hi, I'm Julie Cooper.
And then we'll each tell you a little bit about us before we get started. I'm the actually CEO and co-founder, along with Matt, of a new social venture called Effortless Energy, whose policy proposal and program proposal we'll be talking to you about today. Before this, I actually worked at McKinsey & Company, and I led business development and the DSM business at Blue Star Energy. I also led the municipal implementation of the Chicago Climate Action Plan, and I'm a second year at the University of Chicago now. Julie? Matt?
I'm a first-year Master's of Public Policy student at the Harris School, focusing on energy and urban policy, and I'm also a research assistant at the Energy Policy Institute in Chicago.
Hi, I work for the Chicago Office of Sustainability, and also worked for an Oberlin wind turbine feasibility study before this.
And I'm officially called Chief Nerd, apparently. I worked at the Treasury, and now work at the Computation Institute, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Chicago.
Thanks, guys. So again, I'm Claire from Effortless Energy. Kim is a Chicago homeowner we've had the pleasure of serving. Kim lives in one of Chicago's historic bungalows, single-family homes built in the first half of the 20th century. Because of their age and construction, bungalows are notoriously energy inefficient. Every month, Kim spends approximately 25% of her fixed income on energy bills to heat and cool her home, keep the lights on, and run appliances. And she's no different from many other low-income homeowners who spend up to 30% of their income on energy costs per month. But if Kim invested in home energy efficiency measures, she could save up to 50% of her monthly energy costs. Instead of leaking energy and wasting money, she could put a metaphorical hat, sweater, and windbreaker on her home by insulating and air sealing it properly. She could stop wasting lots of money and energy every month without changing a single thing about her lifestyle. And in addition to saving money and energy, this investment in energy efficiency could improve her home's air quality and thus her health, make her home much more comfortable, and increase her home's value by up to 14%, all while helping to create jobs, increase energy security, and mitigate climate change in the most cost-effective way possible. And Kim is not alone. There are over 1 million households with the potential to save a total of $650 million in annual energy costs in Chicago alone. And McKinsey estimates that there is a $230 billion opportunity for cost-effective energy efficiency nationwide. So with all these amazing benefits, why haven't Kim and a million other Chicago homeowners already made this investment in the energy efficiency of their home? Let me tell you about the current process and where it breaks down. First, Kim has to search to find a certified energy auditor who will come to her house, run a bunch of tests, and then hand her a huge to-do list that's not prioritized by cost effectiveness. And she'll have to pay a couple $100 just for this energy evaluation service alone. Then she has to start working on that big to-do list all by herself, picking items and searching for qualified contractors to do the work. Insulation and air sealing typically cost around $3,000 to $5,000 per home. And if she needs to replace her furnace or other items as well, it could cost up to $20,000. Since Kim can't just write a check that big, she has to go to a bank or use a credit card to get a high interest rate loan and then hope that the predicted cost savings will actually materialize so that she has enough to pay it back. All of Kim's existing financing options for home energy efficiency are riddled with flaws. So even if she makes it through the rest of the process, the financing step is often where the party ends. As a result, Kim resorts to doing nothing. This is where our new social venture, Effortless Energy, comes in. Effortless Energy exists to make home energy efficiency the no-brainer that it ought to be by making it effortless for people to upgrade their homes. With one simple click or call, Kim can reach an effortless energy genius who will then coordinate the entire process for her, including the financing. Some folks have put those first two under one roof, but no one's brought all three together with a viable finance option like Effortless Energy has. To fill the financing gap, we've designed a new mechanism called the Home Energy Efficiency Services Agreement, or HESA, to mimic the successful value propositions of home solar panel companies as well as commercial energy efficiency companies. What we learned from them is that you need to turn the cash flow financing problem into day one, low-risk savings, making it a truly financial no-brainer for Kim and other homeowners. So here's how our HESA model actually works. Kim is paying an average total monthly utility bill. After signing up with Effortless Energy, we use investor funds to cost-effectively improve the efficiency of her home. This investment leads to a reduction in her monthly energy costs, which creates a new annuity from the energy savings. This annuity pays investors back and is shared with Kim. So let's zoom in on the months right before and right after we set up a Home Energy Efficiency Services Agreement so we can see the impacts a bit better. Kim pays less immediately, even while making repayments to the private investors who provide the capital for her HESA service contract. The HESA also shifts energy savings risk from Kim to the investors. And Kim collects all the savings after her contract ends in 10 years. Homeowners love lower bills with no upfront costs, which is why the HESA is designed to make it cheaper overall to save energy than to use it. Effortless Energy's HESA model mobilizes private investors to solve the problem of home energy efficiency by creating a new, low-risk financial asset with a competitive return. The average investment in a Chicago home pays back in 6 years and creates a 7 to 8% return over the life of the 10-year contract. This creates an attractive deal for private investors, especially in this down economy, and especially for those who hope to make an impact as well as a return on their investment. We also leverage existing low-income finance programs, such as the New Market Tax Credit and the Community Reinvestment Act, to make the HESA available to low-income Chicagoans like Kim. These programs provide private investors the tax incentives as well as portfolio mandates they need to make these investments, despite the higher delinquency and default rates, which would otherwise increase their risk and crowd out their investment. In addition to continuing their support of these existing public programs, another great way policymakers can encourage widespread adoption of the HESA is to create an on-bill repayment mechanism, or OBR. OBR legislation has already been passed in California and New York and is being proposed in Ohio, North Carolina, and Texas. With OBR, instead of paying her energy and HESA bills separately, Kim makes her HESA payments right on her utility bill. In addition to making things easier for everyone, there are several other important benefits to OBR. With OBR, the HESA is attractive to more rental properties as well. Normally, there's no incentive for landlords to pay for upgrades if then their tenants reap the energy savings. But when the repayment of private investors occurs right on the utility bill, this problem goes away. Also, OBR allows for repayment to transfer smoothly from one person to the next who is living in the home. If Kim decides to rent out or sell her house, the utility bills and the HESA repayments just stay with the home on the utility bill. Again, OBR ensures that the one reaping the benefits of energy efficiency is also making the repayments. Another great thing about OBR is that utility bills have low default rates and are paid much more reliably than bank loans and credit cards, probably because they have a credible threat of turning off your energy. And we have decades of data to prove this, which is something private investors love to see. This is why we're working with the Illinois state legislators to pass OBR in Illinois. Initial conversations indicate that OBR will enjoy bipartisan support because it achieves many important policy goals without requiring any government outlays or impinging upon individual freedoms. We're currently working with the Environmental Law and Policy Center, a coalition of 15 environmental groups, and Illinois Senate President pro tempore to pass an OBR bill during this session. But we don't need to wait around until OBR is in place to roll out our HESA model. We've already started working with the biggest Chicago home efficiency contractor, DNR Construction, to validate our risk model on 24 homes in the Chicagoland area. The actual upgrades on these homes were paid for by a federal grant program called Energy Impact Illinois, which ends in May. Now that we're confident our HESA model will work, we're ready to start upgrading homes ourselves. We've built partnerships with the Chicago area community of Oak Park and the Historic Chicago Bungalow Association to help us identify our pilot households. We're also partnering with the Cook County Land Bank to identify affordable housing stock on the south and west sides of Chicago that would most benefit from these upgrades. The National Public Policy Challenge winnings would be a major part of this crucial pilot, helping us fund our first 3 HESA investments. One of them could even be in Kim's home, which we've already audited. With these and 17 other pilot homes, we'll have the robust evidence that private investors need to back the HESA model in a much bigger way. This means that, unlike for not-for-profits and governments, which must constantly worry about where their funding is coming from, Effortless Energy's whole model does not rely on government or donation dollars. We just need to finish this pilot. We can start scaling up our self-financing model. Chicago's Mayor Rahm Emanuel has gotten behind us because he set a goal last fall to improve citywide energy efficiency by 5% by 2015. We all know that when that man sets goals, they get met. We're working with his Chief Sustainability Officer to roll out our model. And though utility companies typically aren't big proponents of energy efficiency due to their rate structure, they are looking for new ways to reduce their peak demand-driven costs, meet their energy efficiency portfolio mandates, and offer higher margin products like ours. So we're finding allies in former Exelon CEO John Rowe and ComEd Residential Energy Efficiency Program Manager Mark Hammond that are helping us roll out HESA investments as well. And Effortless Energy has had a ton of traction with the HESA model thus far. In addition to being invited here to present at the finals of the National Public Policy Challenge, we took top 3 honors globally at the International Impact Investing Challenge last year and have also been recognized in a number of other competitive forums. We believe the market timing for our model could not be better, and we're happy to tell you more about why in the Q&A. So in closing, Effortless Energy, with its revolutionary service contracting model for home energy efficiency, is serving Kim and unlocking a huge national market. We hope you'll all agree that this is a great opportunity to start making smart, responsible, sustainable investments right here in our own communities. So thank you so much, and we very much look forward to answering all your questions.
I'd like to start, if I might. I'm the judge who is the least enthusiastic about your proposal. If I'm reading it, I didn't hear your presentation yesterday, but I do appreciate what I've seen and heard today. Here's my one concern. I understand the benefit. I don't know if the benefits to the homeowners can be locked in over a long period of time. Clearly, the home is going to be improved. There's going to be work for vendors, for contractors. They will be paid up front, so there's no liability for them. But we're talking about people who live at the margins. We're also talking about a commodity that continues to appreciate in cost. So what happens 3 or 4 years down the road to this homeowner who hasn't really seen a lot of dollars flow into his or her pocketbook? $20 a month is not going to help them with their other costs. And then they get hit with some catastrophic event. They end up losing the home. This is what I'm trying to grasp, the social utility of your proposal. It's a wonderful proposal, but I'm still not certain that it really can guarantee the kind of long-term benefits to the constituent that you're trying to really help.
Well, I'll address that first by just noting that the investors themselves, the private investors, are taking that risk on. This loan, this contract does not follow the homeowner around if something catastrophic were to happen to them.
Well, I understand that.
Okay.
But you would also want to keep her in her home for as long as possible. That's the point I'm getting to. If some other event that would actually lead to foreclosure or loss of that property, that person that you initially set out to help no longer derives any benefit from your program.
Yeah, so I think one of the things worth mentioning is one of the amazing things that has been shown in fairly recent literature is that lowering kind of the operating costs of a home actually reduces the risk of foreclosure. And one of our main goals is to do that, is by passing some of those savings on to the homeowner, we're actually giving them a little more padding. Now, like you said, since we're not able to pass on the full savings, we're not giving them all of that extra savings padding to protect against future risk. But one of the things we are doing is we are actually reducing something that they are already having to pay out of pocket. Every single one of these homeowners is already paying these high utility bills, right? And so this is an expense that they've already built into their budget, and we are allowing that expense to be a little bit lower. And so while it may not be full reduction that you see through a grant program, we are giving them on the margin additional ability to pay and to absorb future shocks. And I think more importantly, we're giving future homeowners and future renters of that same property, once it's retrofitted, all of those savings and protecting all of those future homeowners against future shocks. And I think that's really where the big benefit comes in.
Yeah, so I'd like to follow up a little bit on the mechanics that you envision, because we've got a few players in here. We've got the private equity lender. We've got you administrating the funds. We have the HESA relationship between the homeowner and the private equity group. The contractors who are doing the improvements to the house, I assume that's between the homeowner and the contractor, or who's administering that? And you'd mentioned 7 to 8% return to the investor. Is that a guaranteed return? What is the margin of risk that they have on this uncertain environment?
So we'll try and take that in two parts. The first being the operations and who's administering it. So that's what Effortless Energy, our social venture, is designed to do in terms of actually coordinating the investments that are made in homes, subcontracting for the actual installation work that is prescribed by our energy genius sort of doctors. And so that's really what our entity is designed to do. We're incorporated as a C Corp, and we're filing for B Corp status as well. The second part of your question, I believe, had to do with how the risk breaks out, so I'll let Matt take that one.
Sure. So the way we actually target that risk is by pre-screening homes. So we have a number of models that help us understand what the expected savings are for each particular home based on the home's attributes. And using those models, we can actually fairly well predict, using both operational data and data about the home itself, to within 2% what future savings are. So we actually target a much higher ROI, around 10 to 14%, and create a little bit of padding around that, so that the overall kind of average portfolio return is around 7 to 8%.
I have a question on your, the OBR needs the change of the Illinois General Assembly. I live on the Indiana-Illinois border, and I know y'all are wallowing in debt over there with pension problems. You've got the lowest bond rating in the state. Your legislature appears to be great live entertainment, I can tell, watching the local media. I'm well aware, as a former legislator and speaker, the power of utilities. And I know you mentioned some low-level or mid-level people in support. I've seen great ideas come to the legislature and sadly just get lost because of lobbying, clout, groups that have great ideas not knowing how the system really works. This requires a change in legislation. So how practical is it that you think that's really going to happen?
So there's sort of two things I would want to say. The first is the benefit to this legislation is it doesn't actually require any government financial outlay. So it doesn't have, you mentioned our budget problems in Illinois, but this wouldn't affect those problems. In terms of, I'm sorry, can you just repeat the second part of your question
Well, I'm
quickly?
just curious how, even though it's a good idea and you say these people are
Oh,
for
right.
it, how you're really going to make sure this gets passed.
Right. So this is why we are working with the Environmental Law and Policy Center, why we have made contacts with the President pro tempore of the Illinois State Legislature, and we're working with groups that are lobbying in Springfield and that are familiar with the system, as you said, to understand, what it would take to get it passed. And because it's already been passed in New York and California, we already have structure that we can bring to legislatures and say, this is how it works in other states, this is how it can work in Illinois.
Two more things I'd like to add is, one, we actually don't need OBR to be passed and for our model to be viable. So just to reiterate that, we'll be looking to pass this policy, but we have a pilot that stands completely apart from that, and it's completely possible for investors to enter into HESA agreements without OBR legislation being passed. Just makes things easier, allows us to address a wider market if they're able to pass it. So just wanted to talk about the conditionality. And then second, we actually met with the former CEO of Exelon, John Rowe, who himself is an environmental lawyer, trained as an environmental lawyer, and he said there is probably a way to bring utility incentives to bear on actually helping get this passed. And it does make sense, right, because they do have peak demand-driven costs, they do have energy efficiency portfolio mandates that they have to meet, and this is another way for them to do that. So we think that we can actually build the necessary coalition to get this through. But again, it doesn't rely on that.
Well, I don't take my other colleagues' time, but just on that point, I thought the OBR actually locked in the homeowner. In other words, it was a source of guarantee to all of the creditors that money would be coming. The person would be paying it through their utility bill. So I want you to really expand on that last point, if you would, that you don't need to have it passed.
Yeah, so the other way, so if we don't have OBR, and again, we're not locking in the particular homeowner, it stays with the home, it stays with the actual property, not the homeowner. But the idea is that you can either pass it through the utility bill, or if OBR is not passed, it can be transferred through effectively a deed. It's called a removable easement. And what we can do is essentially, like if you've ever been approached, if you live in a historical home, there's historical preservation societies that will add an easement to your home to say protect to the front of it. And that means that if you, as current homeowner, agree to that, it's deeded into that property, it's transferred at sale forevermore. And so that kind of thing is what we do, but we'll remove it, and it's clearly stated that we basically have a payment structure. So if they pay back the principal, it's removed. So that's the other way that it can be transferred. We've talked to several real estate lawyers about this, so we think that would work just as well.
I wanted to ask.
Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question about your financing model. You've explained how the advantages of the tax credit and the higher than normal interest would attract investors. However, you've also talked about the risk, and I wonder if those two advantages are enough to balance the risk, and if you could describe what that is. For example, supposing the house burns down, what in the event of foreclosure, I know it goes to the next homeowner, but there could be a year vacancy in between. Like, have you calculated the risk to the investors and whether they'd be willing to take that on?
Yeah, so I think Claire joked about this a little yesterday, that I'm often quoted as saying I'm in a constant state of uncertainty, and my job is to reduce that uncertainty for the investors, right? And so I put a lot of thought into how we do this. And right now, actually, the key source of uncertainty for all the investors we've talked to is that they want to see it done on the first 20 homes. They understand our underlying assumptions and the data we use to be able to say, these are our predicting default rates if we're on the utility bill. This is our predicted default rates if we're separately billed. We use very, very good, very rich foreclosure and delinquency data in order to be able to predict foreclosure and delinquency for any particular home. We've got risk models for each particular homeowner. We've got very good savings models for each particular house. The uncertainty around each of those are fairly known quantities. What's not known is when you bring them all together in the particular way that we're doing it, in the Home Energy Service Agreement, what is the right kind of measure of delinquency and default? And that's why that pilot, those first 20 homes, those first 100 homes, are so critical. And we've talked to so many investors to say, as soon as you do those first 20, as soon as you do those first 50, we're in, because that's the data that we need. So that's what we're really working to address.
Two things. We've talked to over a dozen independent investors that are interested in contributing also to that 20 home pilot. And second, I just wanted to brag about Matt, because he wouldn't brag about himself, but he actually rebuilt a lot of the Treasury's mortgage risk models during the crisis, so he really understands what he's talking about. And it's pretty great to have somebody like that on our team that can help us very credibly integrate both the energy risk models and the very detailed financial risk models into a single model. So anyway, just wanted to brag about him.
Yes. I think I like the program a lot, and obviously it does have a social impact, but from a financial standpoint, I think what would have, at least for me, what would have strengthened the package are two things. One would have been a portfolio for the owner of the property to understand a little bit more how that impacts beyond what we've seen on the slide. And then secondarily, I mean, you can talk to a lot of investors, but until if we had in the package kind of an investor portfolio example of a portfolio package that would be provided to the investor community, and then with that portfolio, some feedback, very specific third-party verifiable feedback from the investor community as to whether or not the risk, and I understand risk from an investor standpoint, that's a risk they're going to have to take on, but some documentation, some verification after testing a financial portfolio around the concept into the investor community.
Yeah, I guess we'll break that into two parts. The first is that there were very strict page limits on what we could include. So we do have glossies and wonderful, lovely things that both inform homeowners and investors, but just didn't have a place for that in our submission. And then the second part of your question was regarding how do the investors believe essentially your risk models, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think in selling the concept, understand the limitations that you have. But to me, there's the concept, and then there's the investor concept, which I think is a more critical component, one of the more critical components that somehow would have found its way into the proposal.
Yeah, I mean, we got great feedback last year at the International Impact Investing Challenge out of the gate. We spoke with CalPERS and TA, CREF, a lot of these folks that manage endowments or retirement funds. They're looking for fixed income asset classes like ours that also have a social value attached to them. They just want to see the first pilots done. And again, if we can pass OBR, that just brings even more data to bear, right? Because we're using the utility bills default and delinquency rate, of which we have literally decades of data. So do you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, but which makes then the legislation, on the one hand, we didn't need the legislation. I think to convince a homeowner to incorporate something on their deed, it's a little tricky. But then it now, just hearing your comment, it does make the legislation that much more significant from the investor community.
It certainly helps, but I mean, there are many other types of asset classes with track records of decades. So we've been paying our credit card bills and our auto loans and our home loans, and we understand, there's lots of data out there already on these risk-rated returns, basically, for investors to chew into. So what we're doing is marrying that with the energy data as well. There's one more. Thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much. And we're going to have NYU come up on deck and get prepared, but we're going to give about 5 minutes for the judges to grade. Thank you.